Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. The national budget speech was presented last Monday, and as has been the case for the past 22 years, FNB Botswana gathered policymakers, members of industry and the media to weigh in and discuss the output of the budget speech in their annual budget review seminar. As arguably the most important announcement made by Parliament, the budget speech is read and watched by Botswana from all walks of life. FNB CEO Stephen Bogatsu got the proceedings underway.
The 23rd budget review is in the tradition of previous seminars, where we reflect upon some of the key aspects that were raised during the national budget speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we value your contribution in this seminar. It is the cornerstone of meaningful debate and exchange of ideas. Our online audience will also get the opportunity to pose questions to the panel and share their views. There has been a global trend of sustained economic instability, which came to a head in 2016. Britain's exit from European Union and the recent American elections have had their own significant impact on the world's economy. On the home front, the ripple effects of some of the occurrences of last year, including the BCL liquidation and other liquidations that have been in the media, will manifest during the course of this year. Against a backdrop of worldwide and local uncertainty, we have cause to remain cautiously optimistic. What strategies do we devise to assist us in pulling ourselves out of this economic rut? Many of these strategies have been shared at many gatherings in the past, including Business Botswana conferences, HLCC, and others. The key to the success of these strategies lies in grit and dedicated implementation, which we all hope will happen with NDP 11.
First Issues took the opportunity to speak to members of the distinguished panel of guests that had gathered at the Gaborone International Convention Center around this time last week. Painting a picture of the global economic trends within which the national budget was drawn up was currency strategist and co-head of research at Rand Merchant Bank South Africa, John Cairns, best known for writing the Global Markets Daily every morning.
My job is to set the international scene, and in the past few years when we've come here, we've chatted, it's always been about the weakness in the global economy, how that's negatively impacting on Botswana, and that's still the main trend. But there are two interesting themes going on at the moment that can impact all of us here in Botswana. The first is the election of President Trump. It's potentially a game changer, could potentially, and I say potentially, lead to higher global economic growth. It could also lead to lower economic growth, and this is really creating some concern. But if Trump does some of the positive things he suggests, he gets the US into a higher growth path, of course that would positively impact Botswana. Remember, the US is still the biggest demander of diamonds in the world. And then the other themes, of course, what's happening south of the border. And again, the themes are mixed. It looks like South Africa's economy is finally turning the corner. It's going to be picking up. But there again, there's the politics, the uncertainty over the ANC elective conference at the end of the year, the uncertainty over the finance minister post, which is creating uncertainty and spilling into the economy.
As you rightly mentioned, President Trump looks set to shake up the world, both politically and economically, with the travel bans and, of course, looking to revisit some trade deals the US has with different countries. What is doable within the next 4 years of his presidency with regards to trade and these trade deals, and how do you think the global economy will respond, the international community?
From an economic perspective, we can perhaps split it into three different areas. So the first is the travel bans, the wall against Mexico and so on. And those are highly contentious politically, but they're not major issues economically. You rightly point out to one of the major economic issues, which is protectionism, so putting import duties and so on. Africa in general has very little trade with the US, and Botswana, South Africa as well, very little direct trade. It's not directly threatened by any of those protectionist measures. But protectionist measures can impact on the global economic growth rates and so on, and have therefore impact commodity prices and a secondary impact on Africa. So those protectionist policies, I think here in Botswana, since South Africa, should see that as a real threat to the economy. But the third factor, and we must remember, is that Trump has a lot of pro-growth policies, so deregulation, a potential fiscal stimulus which can push the US to a higher growth rate. So there's the positives and the negatives, and I think we're all just waiting to see which of these two factors are really going to dominate. I'm sure you're aware that global stock markets have hit record highs. Global confidence has risen after the Trump victory, so it's the market belief that the stimulus side is going to hold more than the protectionist side, but it's still an unknown.
Globally, what other key trends do you see, influencers should we look out for in this financial year?
Yeah, so the other major economic zones are always important. Europe's economy is doing fairly decently, but they have a lot of political risk themselves this year. There's a lot of elections in Holland, in France, potentially in Italy. Those could upset some surprises. There's potentially some anti-Euro parties coming into power, could upset the global economy. And of course, we can't ignore China. China's economy seemingly has decelerated. It's now doing fairly well, but there's still a lot of uncertainty about the sustainability of Chinese growth with high levels of debt, etc. And Africa, even indirectly Botswana, still dependent on China sucking in those commodity imports.
Welcome back to First Issues as we help to wind down the week of discussions that followed the national budget speech that was presented last Monday. Before the break, John Cairns described a global economy that is yet to recover, one that could be boosted or hurt by the newly elected US President Donald Trump, depending on the direction his administration takes, among other things. What then do local analysts, the likes of FNB RMB economist Moatlhodi Sibabole, make of the national budget that was formulated in response?
No fireworks, I think, from the budget, a relatively flat budget as read by the minister this year. What stood out for me was the narrowing deficit, as we have seen. The same time last year, we were talking a cumulative deficit of around 10 billion. This time around, we're talking just under 4 billion. So that's narrowing of around 6 billion. The fact that it's coming just when we are starting the first year of NDP 11, second year of the stimulus program, popularly termed ESP, also meant by virtue of that we expected expenditure to increase because government will be putting money after projects to stimulate, as the ESP is suggesting, as well as obviously to incept the infrastructure developments under the NDP 11. So that headline expenditure also did increase compared to what it was last year. So the narrative then was matched with the numbers that we are seeing from the expenditure side of things. On the other side as well, very minimal on targets, so very, very difficult to evaluate critically in terms of what exactly are we setting out to achieve and how would we gauge that when you go into the next year. How many jobs will have been created, which industries will have been stimulated and how, and what we are hoping to achieve in there.
In addition to what Mr. Sibabole says, Bogolo Kenewendo feels that it is not only about content and substance, but also about messages, highlighting the issues that matter to the people and how the budget proposes to deal with them.
I wouldn't say it's far removed from the realities on the ground. Perhaps the wording of the speech wasn't appeasing. You know, it didn't highlight the issues that people wanted to hear. Because in this current circumstance, what you need to hear is that we have an accommodative monetary policy and you have an expansionary fiscal policy that work together to ensure that there's a boost in the economy, which will generate jobs in the short term and create infrastructure for jobs in the long term. And those things are there in the budget speech, just that it wasn't highlighted that jobs will be created here. The thing is, we need to be very aware of messaging. And I think perhaps the budget, the way it was delivered or worded, really missed the messaging opportunity there, you know. There were various ways I feel we could have highlighted the things that we worked on during NDP 11 and that are in the budget that really show that the government is working towards inclusivity, you know, bringing in more Botswana to benefit from our natural resources and our revenues, and that we could have highlighted even more that we are dealing with social development issues, you know, not just mention poverty once, but also highlight that we are well aware of the changing landscape because of the closures of mines and the closures of some manufacturing industries, and what the plan is to do that. And the plan of investment in infrastructure might not seem to be catering for some people in the short term, but in the end, it's facilitatory. It's facilitatory investment for medium to long-term gains. But I caution that it is facilitatory if it's done timely. I said I would be using this often. If it's done timely, I highlight timely for these mega projects because, you know, we've been dealing with water shortages for a long time, and yet dams and water reticulation have been appearing in our budgets for the last 5 years. It's not that we haven't been prioritizing them financially, but we haven't been prioritizing them for implementation. And so the question is why? Because when we don't do that, then we miss out on the opportunity to deliver the impacts to the people. So now I feel we are, again, in that transitionary period where we need to see things happening faster. We are seeing that these are priority for our budgets because they are appearing in our budget year in, year out. But we need our implementers to really run with the mantle and ensure that they happen in a timely fashion. Otherwise, our competitiveness, both regionally and globally, will be reduced.
That is a recurring theme, I think, in on a lot of subjects. Botswana has great policies, in a number of areas, but implementation always appears to be the hiccup. Can we then hope that things will change? Are there signs that we can act on the identified challenges and issues? Is there anything there?
So I'll say yes, because this has been, and it was a big debate issue during NDP 11 discussions, monitoring and evaluation of mega projects in particular. And then in the budget speech, there was the minister introduced that we will be working with international organizations to enhance our monitoring and evaluation systems, particularly in budgeting, to reduce wastage and to ensure that, you know, our budgeting goes well and the implementation also runs well. So I think it being highlighted and our partnership with other organizations shows that it is now a priority, and we are aware that if we don't move fast enough, then we will miss out on some opportunities. It is, again, key that we ensure that we have costed these projects properly so that, you know, our supplementary budgets are not in the figures of billions again, you know. And I was just happy to hear that that will be coming in this fiscal year.
Speaking of the private sector, for years government has been talking of having the private sector be the drivers of economic growth, play a bigger part. It's a big topic in terms of diversification. And yet, when it comes to privatization, we can only point to BTCL as a success, having successfully privatized.
Yes.
And all the while, they're new parastatals, some of them even said to be having duplicate functions. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think some of the things were delayed by PPP. I'll start there. Some of the things in relation to Triple P were delayed by a lack of a unit, because for the longest time, the Ministry of Finance was trying to find the head of the unit and to operationalize it. And now we heard during the budget speech that one of the first projects that will be championed by that unit would be on land servicing. So we will see private players in that space assisting the government. And yes, when it comes to privatization, I mean, we have really not moved fast enough. I'll keep going back to timeliness and reforming in a timely manner, because in this day and age, everything is about when you move and how fast you move. And for privatization, everyone has been looking at Air Botswana's privatization for the longest period. I think the first time was maybe 2003 or 2006, somewhere there, when we were close enough and we felt something was going to happen. And this time around, you know, there have been rumors swirling that we would see a privatization of Air Botswana, but nothing happened, or we didn't hear anything during the budget speech. I don't particularly have full information on the privatization of Air Botswana to pick, but privatization needs for an entity to be profitable. That's when the private sector would want to go into it. But if it's not profit making, then it's not viable for the private sector.
Thank you for staying with us as we continue to present some of the discussions sparked by this year's National Budget Speech, with the help of the speakers from the 23rd FNB Budget Review Seminar held last Tuesday. Dr. Tiro Mampane, founder and president of Boitekanelo Group of Companies, represented the private sector, giving a talk titled Powering SMMEs, an elixir for restoring business confidence. He tells us what his key messages in response to this year's budget speech were, along with giving some of his recommendations.
By the outlook, our budget, of course, because of the current economic downturn, it's more of a balancing act. So our government is still a little bit, not too much stimulating, but they are trying to stimulate, looking at the budget challenges that they're currently going through. So really the opportunities for SMMEs from the budget is to look into the mega projects that government is planning to implement within the 2017-2018 budget, is to look into the social services, especially Minister of Education, Basic Education has been given a huge chunk of money. So as entrepreneurs or as SMMEs, we have to look into what services can we deploy or can we render to Minister of Basic Education, including even Minister of Health and Wellness. As entrepreneurs, we need to look into what ancillary services does Minister of Health and Wellness requires, so that we can position ourselves to be able to participate effectively in the 2017-2018 budget.
The role of SMMEs has been well documented as being important in economic growth. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well would you say local SMMEs are participating in the business and economic space?
The challenge with Botswana is that our economy is more of a government-led economy. So SMEs are not being able to play a significant role, but we all know it's clearly documented that SMEs can be a major contributor of job creation and job employment which was the theme, or which is the theme of NDP 11, which is the theme that the minister articulated. So I think it's important that there's a conducive environment that is being deployed by government so that SMEs can be able to take their rightful space in terms of creation of employment. But we also need to be looking very strategic and looking forward in terms of how does SMEs being able to play a role. A classical example, we should be looking into manufacturing as compared to supplies that a lot of SMEs are currently doing supplies. So our government should be encouraging our SMEs to be involved in manufacturing as compared to for them just being suppliers of goods and services that our government requires. That's when we can be able to see the impact of SMEs. And these are documented articles and research that has been clearly outlined worldwide how SMEs can contribute to the growth of the economy. And eventually SMEs can also grow to the extent that they can even eventually export their services. And that's also diversification of the economy that the minister has articulated clearly in his budget speech as one key priority areas that the 2017-2018 budget will be focusing on.
That concludes our program tonight, but before we leave, we'd like to read the winning message from last week. It is from Douglas Dumelo Mafifi, who says that once again we have made him aware of some important life matters and that he now fully understands how a will operates. Congratulations, Douglas. We'll get that thank you gift to you soon. You watching at home can also help contribute to the growth of our program by participating in our ongoing Facebook poll. To do so, simply visit the First Issues Facebook page, click on the link to the poll, and answer a few simple questions. If you experience problems accessing the poll through the link, simply send us an inbox message from the page indicating your desire to contribute your feedback. Thereafter, we'll send you a series of questions to determine the frequency with which you watch the program, your opinion regarding our content and delivery, along with any suggested recommendations you may have. Your feedback as we near the end of yet another successful season can only guarantee that we continue to bring you better and more relevant content season after season. We cannot wait to hear what your observation has been. It's not too late to join in on the conversation on any of our social media platforms or even via text. But for now, it's good night from me, Namitso Samakula, and the First Issues team.